Good morning, everyone. Thanks for waiting a few minutes for us to get started today. We're very glad to have you all here for this very helpful program, I think, to talk about the state of financial education in Maryland and get some viewpoints from the experts. My name is Julie Weaver, and I am the Executive Director of the Maryland Council on Economic Education. And I'm so proud to be co-hosting this event with the Maryland DC Credit Union Association. I know that they are also very committed to expanding access to financial education in Maryland, and they're a wonderful partner to us. Just a little bit about MCEE before we get started. For those of you who aren't familiar with us, we're a nonprofit organization based on the campus of Towson University that has been around for almost 70 years to serve Maryland teachers and educators with the goal of helping students graduate high school with the skills that they need to be successful in life, not specifically the economic and personal finance skills. And we do that through providing professional development workshops and courses to improve instruction in the classroom for teachers with a focus on creating long-term behavioral change for students. We also provide classroom resources, lesson plans, activities, books, and other things to support what teachers are doing and the curriculum that they're following. And we also offer engaging student programs that help students really get excited about learning these concepts and practicing them, and again, promote long-term behavioral change so that they really enter life really feeling equipped to handle their own money management. I'm so pleased today to be joined by Senator Kathy Klausmeier and Delegate Dana Stein, who are, as you all probably know, the co-chairs of the Financial Education and Capability Commission, and also long-term supporters of expanding access to financial education in schools. In addition, we have Rory Murray, who is the Vice President of Advocacy at the Maryland DC Credit Union Association. Rory is going to be moderating a discussion today with Senator Klausmeier and Delegate Dana Stein. And just as a little agenda to let you know how the events are going to flow today, we're going to kick off with Rory doing an introduction and leading a discussion with Senator Klausmeier and Delegate Stein about what's happening at the state level. And then we're going to transition to hearing a little bit about what's been happening at the county level in Montgomery County. And we're going to hear directly from one of the students who's involved in an organization called InnovateX, where the students have really been lobbying their school board to expand access to them for more personal finance education. Unfortunately, she couldn't appear with us live today because she's actually in school. So she sent a video recorded message for us to play for you. So with that, I'd like to hand it over to Rory to get us started. Thanks, Rory.
Sure. Thanks so much. And thanks to the council for inviting me to come moderate this panel. As Julie said, the credit union's part of the credit union mantra is not only just providing great banking services for their members, but to give people the education to make financial choices that are best for them and give them the financial freedom to live the lives that they want to lead. Obviously, a huge part of that is financial literacy education, which leads to our conversation today. So what I thought might be helpful was I give a brief overview of the background of financial literacy education legislation in the state. I promise it won't be too long. And then we'll go to the state of the current law, and then kind of what the most recent movement on these issues have been. And then I'll ask a couple questions for Senator Klausmeier and Delegate Stein to answer, and be an organic, free-flowing conversation from there, hopefully. So the history of financial literacy education in Maryland, at least as far back as I can find in the archives, really goes back to 2005. Speaker Mike Bush at the time actually introduced with a gentleman named Delegate Moe, who was before my time. Maybe Dana knows him, but it was a bill that first urged the county school boards to integrate the principles of basic personal finance into the curriculum. Now, this bill did not pass, but as we see now, there are several counties, I believe it's 8 at the last count, that have decided to take this step and integrate personal finance into their curriculums and make it a mandatory course. In 2006, a gentleman from Baltimore County named Delegate Bodler, who will not be in the General Assembly starting in the next session, had a bill to create a task force to create a summit on financial literacy in Maryland. That bill did not move forward. And then in 2007, Senator Astle, an old colleague of Senator Klausmeyer's, and a gentleman named Senator Lennet, had another bill really similar to Speaker Bush's bill in 2005, once again urging the county school boards to create a program. Now, pretty much every single year since that point, spearheaded in part by Delegate Dana Stein and Senator Klausmeyer, there has been at least one bill to mandate financial literacy education in school curriculums, either statewide or at the county level. And for reasons we'll get into a little bit later, most have not been successful. So the current state of the law, as many of you know, and I'll take a quick second, there are representatives here from Delegate Brooke Learman's office and from the Comptroller's office as well. So I just want to say hello to them and thank you for tuning in. The current state of the law is that with the advice of the state superintendent of schools, the State Board of Education has to establish, obviously, the guidelines of instruction and curriculum for the public schools. Each school system must provide personal financial literacy programs in elementary, middle school, and high school that meet the content that's stated in the SBE regulations. Every 5 years, the local superintendents have to certify that they are keeping current with this mandate, that they're providing this level of this bottom level of education. And at the high school level, financial literacy must be embedded in courses required for graduation. As we'll discuss a little later, what that actually means and how that takes part in practice, folks have had differing experiences with, which is one issue that I think could be addressed through legislation without having to change curriculum. MSD does offer online financial literacy courses that are available to all students, but they're not mandatory. And local school systems have a lot of flexibility of how they want to implement these programs. Lastly, the most recent movement on this bill, Delegate Jay Walker from Prince George's County, who has been a long time proponent of financial literacy education being a mandate in curriculum. And, as an aside, Prince George's County public schools has been a real, standard bearer on this issue. They've done a great job with it. They've got a very robust program in place. But he had a bill that made it through the House this year, didn't make it through the Senate, but it would have required the State Board of Education to develop curriculum content for a half-credit course in financial literacy. And it would have required that each local Board of Education implement the curriculum that was developed and make it available to students at every public high school. So it's not the perfect bill, but it was more than we have now. It made it through the House, stalled out in the Senate, and that is the current state of play now. So with that all in mind, for Senator Klausmeyer and Delegate Stein, you are both leaders on this issue. You have been for a long time in the state of Maryland. What first brought this to your attention and made you want to be an active leader on an issue that's quite frankly had an uphill battle in the state.
Well, I for one, was on the board of the Maryland Council for Economic Education, and I met several people, and I see Marianne Hewitt's there and Alan's there. And one day Alan was in my office and we had the discussion about how we were lagging in the whole situation. And Alan said something. I said, that's it. I'm putting the bill in and saying we have to have it in the curriculum. And that was the very first bill. And Alan, I don't know what year that was. But because I didn't realize all those other bills, you pulled out that, Mike Bush even had one. So from that, I believe we did not get, obviously we did not get that, but there was a big task force back in the day, and I'm not even sure what year that was. But as time went on, the comptroller, Peter Francho, got very involved. And I mean, he would come in and, testify on the bills. He would have press conferences. We did everything that you could possibly do. We had tons of people at these press conferences, tons of people testifying. And I see Evan Richards, who is now working for the Maryland Bankers. He was still in high school then, and he came down and testified on the bill. And that's how long ago it was. So Evan, what year was that? Do you remember? Evan's
2011.
2011. You want to sit here with me? What do you got? Okay. All right. So I have a sick little grandchild here who's begging for a little attention. So, but anyway, that's the story on this whole thing. And out of the task force, there were several little things that were done, but never made it to the point of what we really, really wanted, was to have the curriculum in school. And I believe there was down in Easton, so I guess that would be Talbot County. They were like one of the first ones to have it in their curriculum, but we just could not move the needle as time went on. Even with the help of the comptroller, the treasurer's department, the treasurer, it just didn't work. I don't know, Alan, do you have anything you would like to say about that?
No, I think you summarized it pretty well. It's been a long campaign, if you will, and that's one of the reasons why I think we got together today to talk a little bit more about the challenges.
Yeah, and one thing that happened during that time is one county must have been Southern Maryland County that Mike Miller represented. They wanted some curriculum put in, and by golly, it got in. So I thought that last year what Bill Ferguson was pretty well into, let's get financial education. I thought maybe that may have been the golden egg, that since the president of the Senate wanted it, maybe we could get it. But the chairman of the committee didn't want to have it. And as I said, the reason being is because he said he had 10 or 12 different legislators, senators, wanting their particular expertise, their, whatever it was, their bill, maybe it's like studying, the weather, or, studying global warming in schools, you have to have a credit, whatever. And he's just said you can't pass one without passing the other. So that's where we got stymied. So I don't know, Dana, do you have anything?
Yeah, I guess maybe I'll start off by talking about my interest in the topic broadly. It really dates back to my first year in the legislature in 2007, when we were in the midst of the housing crisis. started off with problems in the non-conventional mortgage market, then spread to the conventional mortgage market. And we were hearing stories about how, sometimes mortgagors were, being maybe getting bad info about mortgages that they, entered into. And in other cases, they just signed up for mortgages where they should have known better. And so it occurred to me, well, maybe this represents a broader lack of understanding of basic money concepts. And so that's when we set up what Senator Klossmeyer is referring to, the first task force to look at financial education, both in schools and for adults. And honestly, my position with respect to financial education in schools, at first I supported the compromise that came out of the task force and then was approved by the State Board of Ed. That is to develop these content standards, the financial literacy education standards, which give local jurisdictions, LEAs, the flexibility as how to implement. I took the position that, okay, well, I'm okay with this local flexibility. But then what caused me to change my thinking on this was, as often the case, when a family member conveys a strong point of view. And in my case, my daughter just finished, she's in 10th grade at public high school. And she said last year in 9th grade in her government class, where she was supposed to learn some of the concepts of financial education, the one thing she learned was about fiscal and monetary policy. That was it. And while I'm glad she knows the difference between fiscal and monetary policy, doesn't really help on the key matters of financial education that we're concerned about. So that's when I became convinced that we do need a graduation requirement, and I'm now supportive of it. One thing I'll note is that Delegate Walker's bill, which again, as Rory mentioned, didn't establish a graduation requirement, just said that this course has to be offered in every public high school. It had 85 co-sponsors in the House of Delegates. So that shows that there's a lot of support in the House for stronger financial education requirements in public schools than what we've got now.
Great. So thank you. And that kind of leads into my next question, to dovetail a little bit off of Delegate Stein's final point. The Maryland DC Credit Union Association, financial literacy education is always one of our legislative priorities. Obviously, there's no business value to credit unions to have a mandated curriculum in the high schools or in the schools generally, but we hear so many stories, or we do so many events where high school kids who are getting ready to graduate, we will run them through some life scenarios, and they look almost clueless, and they ask us, how can I learn more about this? I don't feel like I'm prepared. I'm about to either go to college or I'm going to start working, and I don't know how to balance my bank account. I've never learned about it. I've never thought about it. Even simple things of, if I need to take out a loan, there's interest on a loan. There's 6% interest on a $10,000 loan that I'm going to pay back over X amount of years. For a lot of people, it can be a pretty easy calculation if you've thought about it before, or if you've taken out loans before, if you've accrued some debts. And there's a lot of programs online that can calculate these for you. But there's a lot of people, especially high school students, where this has not been top of mind, where they have no idea really what interest means, how interest is calculated, how interest can cost more than a loan over the life of the loan, which, as we see with the student loan crisis or with the mortgage bubble, not being able to calculate how these things work over time, it can ruin somebody's finances for a long time. So there's obviously a need that needs to be filled. And from our standpoint, in an advocacy position, I've never run into a legislator who hasn't been in favor of this issue. Nobody's going to come out and say that they don't think financial literacy education is a good thing. So to both Senator Klausmeyer and Delegate Stein's point, there's a lot of support for financial literacy education, but there's not any actual support to mandate it. So we've discussed it a little bit, and we don't have to dig into the nitty-gritty details and call any individuals out here, but what are the major issues? Who are the major players? What are the issues? And do you see a path forward in the current thinking of how it's been moving forward, or what path do you see forward with this in Maryland, if any?
Well, I will tell you, first of all, as I said, Bill Ferguson was a proponent of financial education. When we talked about the baby bond bill, he was all excited about it. That's the first thing. The second thing is, I think we're somewhat premature because we do not know who the players are going to be in 2023. That could all change, and we might have a very good path to get to where we are. So, or where we want to be, because might be a different mentality, but we don't know that yet. And so, and if it is the same group that we have now, it's like you're running into a brick wall. And that's all I can say. And unless we could get Bill Ferguson to twist some arms, but again, we don't know who the players are going to be. We might have somebody that's like, yeah, we're gonna push this through, and the heck with the rest of the 12 other things that people need, because we know that this is something solid on the ground that people need this. Do people need to know about global warming? Yes, they do. But this is, what they say, all politics is local. And this kind of situation, all bills are very, very local and very personal. And you got to take care of yourself before you can take care of the global warming. So, but again, it's premature, so.
Yeah, and I'll add, Senator Klausmeyer is completely right. We don't know what sort of if there'll be changes in the legislature for 2023 in terms of who will be in leadership positions. So, with the current lineup, as Senator Klausmeyer said, maybe in the Senate, it would be particularly challenging. So I guess we'd have to wait and see to make better predictions about 2023. We'll say now, so with the fact that we did pass Delegate Walker's bill with so many co-sponsors is a good sign. And perhaps we could, convert that strong support for his bill to support for a graduation requirement. I mean, I don't know, but the fact that, again, there was strong support for this year for Delegate Walker's bill, I think is a good sign.
I don't know how many senators were on my bill, and looking back, I bet there were tons. There's nobody against financial education. Everybody wants it. And as I said, even the comptroller, I mean, we just had tons and tons and tons of people, and actually went to many conferences that everybody was trying, all different states were looking at it. And whoever's the new governor, say for instance, whichever governor wins, comes in and says, I want financial literacy in the schools. Done. It's going to be a done deal then. Because I can't see somebody fighting the governor over it, but everything's, like I said, very premature. In 74 days, we will know what that answer is, but we still will not know the makeup of the Senate. We might know the makeup, but we're not going to know who's in leadership and who's not in leadership and what's going on with that whole thing. So I don't want to paint a dismal picture. It's not a dismal picture. It's just, you can't do anything without knowing the players.
Yeah, and while I was preparing for this, I also started thinking, and this is something for everybody on the call, being advocates in this issue area to think about is, are there other routes we could take that might have, a better chance if things stay somewhat similar to where they are now, from a legislator point of view. One of my thoughts was the law already requires that financial literacy education be embedded into current courses. Well, maybe if it's slightly tweaked to say that a standardized curriculum of financial literacy education has to be embedded in these courses, then at least at that point, from the advocate's perspective and the legislator's perspective and the school board's perspective, we know exactly what that means. And we're not changing anything in the law except for it's a mandated course of study. So just, food for thought for everybody on the call, who are experts in this issue area. If there are out of the box suggestions that you think may work, I mean, feel free either to talk to Julie, being an expert in this world, obviously, or me or Senator Klausmeyer or Delegate Stein, because at this point there are no bad ideas. Whatever we can do to try and get some sort of rigorous instruction into the curriculum is good. So just food for thought. So shifting gears a little bit, I know on the call here, most folks are advocates like myself in financial literacy. So Senator Klausmeyer and Delegate Stein, from your point of view, what makes a good advocate? Versus not necessarily a bad advocate, but some are definitely more effective than others. What advice do you have for everybody on the call on how to, have their voices heard, bring solutions that can be actionable? What are your thoughts?
I don't know that answer. Like I said, when you have the comptroller sitting right in front of the committee expressing his interest and he doesn't get anywhere, it's all depends on who the leadership is.
I think more from a general matter. If people want to engage in advocacy, what can they do to be effective?
Okay, they can join the MCEE. There you go. And they can find different groups that are dealing with this. There are so many groups that do have financial literacy as one of their mainstays. Dana, with your job, do you have that?
Yeah. We have, we work with, wearing my nonprofit hat, there's some groups that we work with, both to provide services to our participants as well as to advocate more locally. Like there was the cash campaign in
Yeah, I
Baltimore
was just
City.
going to say, the cash campaign. Is anybody here from there? I don't know.
Yeah, I saw Lonia Muckle on there.
So there are, and the credit unions, the banks, almost every bank has some sort of financial education. I'm sure the credit unions have the same. So there are so many existing things that are going on around the world, around the state, and just around the curriculums, but we can't just pull them all together. And, I guess it depends on which bank you put your money in and what credit union you might have your money in, that they may have a course to teach this. And even though I've gone to places that have wraparound services for the neighborhood, they have banks coming in to teach financial literacy. It's everywhere, but it just isn't a consistent, sustainable course that people need. So, and I don't want to be Kathy Dismal, well, but we just have to wait and see who's there, who's going to be in leadership, and who's the governor. And, and as I said, Bill Ferguson, as far as I know, he's going to be president of the Senate, and we'll just have to put some pressure on him. And for everybody that's here, make sure you know who your legislator is, and get a letter writing campaign to your senators and your delegates. That's how we got one of our new schools. We had a letter writing campaign, and they just kept it up and kept it up. And it wasn't just 2 or 3 letters, but it was hundreds and hundreds of letters. And nowadays, I guess you might not send letters, but you might send emails. But it's so important for everybody on this call to know who their senator is and who their delegates are. And I can't say that enough. And we need to hear from you.
Yeah, and I would, Rory, on your question of what's a good approach to advocacy, certainly personal stories are the most effective. Talking about, say, if this was a number of years ago, a number of homeowners might be able to say that they weren't clear about the terms of the mortgage that they were entering into, and how, if there was an adjustable rate mortgage that they entered into, when there was a teaser rate that, but then it shifts to a high fixed rate, they weren't, they weren't aware of the impact. And so, as an example of how better financial education in schools could have made a difference. And then also on the more positive side, when, parents of kids who have gone through financial education classes, and, the value, the benefits of what they've learned. I mean, conveying those types of personal stories are, particularly effective to legislators.
Mm-hmm. And the thing is now, and back when we had that first crisis, I don't know if we have all those different kind of loans. And so we have to get somebody, I guess, that really knows all that kind of stuff at this point. And, so many changes were made, thank goodness. But some for good, some for bad. So, Alan, what do you think?
Yeah, and talking about challenges, and I work with school systems all over the state, and we have made presentations to school boards. And as Senator Klossmeyer said, no one disagrees that this is not an important issue for every single student to have before they graduate from high school. Because let's face it, the kids are going to be making decisions. They're going to be making financial and education and economic decisions. They're going to take on debt. They're going to maybe take on student loan debt, for example. I wonder how many students who are current 12th graders are considering taking out a loan to pay for college and are thinking that their student loan debt is going to be forgiven. Well, the new legislation has nothing to do with what 12th graders are going to enter into now. So, the issue is that most of us look back and say, I wish I would have had this in school. And so how are we going to make that a reality for every single student in Maryland, not just those who are happen to be in a school system where it's a graduation requirement? That's the challenge, and it's such an important issue that we can't just keep talking about it. We actually have to do something about it.
Well, and I just have to say, part of the reason I put that original bill and it just came to me is Alan and Mary Ann would have to go to, for a better word, cocktail parties or receptions to actually meet people that were on school boards in different counties. And I said, that's ridiculous. You shouldn't have to go all over the state to have to do this. But that's how this all started for me, because I thought, what a waste. Well, I mean, if you like to go to a cocktail party, that's okay, but then you have to jump on the people that are there and everything else. It shouldn't have to be this hard, but it is.
Yeah, and I just want to note that Marquita Friday, who is the director of career programs at MSDE, made a note in the chat to clarify that through regulation, MSDE requires financial literacy content in elementary, middle, and high schools, and the school district systems determine how to implement it. Some require standalone courses, and some systems incorporate the content into existing courses. So thank you for MSDE to be here. I hope we can count on your support to standardize this. I think it's clear to everybody anywhere you talk to that this is an extremely important issue. So to not have this standardized somewhere in the curriculum, it makes little sense. It's such an important topic. We could go on and on and on for days on stories. So my last question, or it's more of an open-ended statement, is, in the meantime, there are a lot of folks on this call that operate different nonprofits or not-for-profits or programs within their credit unions or banks, what have you, that offer financial literacy programs for school students. Please, feel free to reach out either to myself or to Julie or to any of your local financial institutions. If your schools or your kids or whoever it is looking for financial literacy education, as Senator Klausmeier says, it's a bit of jumping through hoops trying to figure out where to make this happen right now, because it's not in the school systems. But it is out there. I did want to say that Lee Philbosian is on here from the Credit Union Foundation of Maryland. She was one of the folks that also helped set this up. The CU Foundation of Maryland is a nonprofit that's part of the Maryland DC Credit Union Association, and they are heavily focused and have been for a long time on financial literacy. They help schools build these programs internally, whether it's an out-of-class club called a Millionaires Club, where kids on their own time can join this club and learn about different scenarios and learn about financial literacy. I know the association, I know the Bankers Association, the Credit Union Association, the Bankers Association. We've got folks that are more than happy to come out and talk to educators and students and really whoever wants to talk about how to get them some sort of financial literacy education, whether that's coming out to their schools and doing a financial reality fair, or directing people of where they can go if they're looking for information. So quite simply, it's too important to not have access to, and there is access if you are looking. Obviously, we would like it to be easier to find, but it is out there. So any final comments on that from Senator Klausmeier, Delegate Stein?
Yeah, I just want to say, I'm sitting here thinking every year we have had, of course, the COVID had changed all this, but we have every year we have had in the past people that have been like a leader in their school or a leader doing financial education. And we have had a little reception in Annapolis, and then we give out resolutions for those particular people. Now, I have a theory when the sports comes in and we have resolutions, I don't like to stand because, that's just my bias. And my feeling is any educator or anything that is about education, people need to stand and clap and have a standing ovation. That's just my mental feeling. But what has happened now, the people that have won these financial education awards, it's like bump, bump, bump. So what I'm trying to say is all of you, again, know your senator, and you call your senator and say, this is a very, very important issue to me. You let your delegates know, because when they come in with these awards, it's like, oh, okay, financial education, financial literacy. Make your legislators know how important it is to you. I can't stress that enough. And that's the only way we're going to get, it would be great to have every senator on a bill that we have. And that's all I can say. We are all there to listen to you guys. And please take advantage of us.
Yeah, and Senator Klaasmeier makes a very, very good point. There are a lot of groups, many probably represented on this call, that are already doing this type of education on the ground in classes, K through 12, adult education classes, in different, maybe it's senior centers on what scams, seniors should be particularly on guard against. There's a lot of great work happening, and we really appreciate that. And at the same time, I feel, and Senator Klaasmeier, other folks here feel that at the high school level, when students are really focused on starting to recognize the importance of money matters, starting to deal with money issues on their own, that's when it's really important to have a standalone course, which they need to take. Again, just based on my own experience at home, that embedding it into the curriculum at the high school level hasn't worked. And so that's why we need a standalone course.
I think you hit the nail on the head right there.
And that
Thank
was my final question. I did want to take an extra second just to thank Julie from MCE for setting all this up. A lot of coordination on your end. So thank you for all the work. Thanks for pulling everybody together. It's a really important issue.
Yeah, I just like to add to the discussion just on one topic. And thank you so much, Rory. You've done a wonderful job. And thank you, Senator Klaasmeier and Delegate Stein, for your leadership on this issue. The point I wanted to make is that MSD has wonderful standards that are very comprehensive, that cover a lot of the topics that students need to learn. But the problem that we see here, sort of working with all the school districts, is that it's applied very unevenly. So what one student may learn in one area is not what another student may learn in another. So you end up with some students that are at a disadvantage to others. And we as an organization want every student to be positioned to succeed in life. So that's why we continue to participate in conversations about expanding access and making more financial education available to students statewide.
And that's a great point, Julie. I'll add something on there from what I've seen working with the different schools over the years is, the folks that we typically see not getting the best financial literacy education through these programs are from areas that are already, in the lower income bracket. So it just continues, once again, a reason why standardization becomes so important, because you might go to a census tract that has a very high median income. Those folks, the school systems might be better, the instruction might be better, they might be learning more at home, about financial literacy education, and it might not be a huge issue, but then you go to places that are on the lower end, and they might not be getting this at home because their parents didn't learn it before them, and then the schools aren't doing it because they're trying to juggle a million other things. Standardization really, not only does it make it, I think, and I'll say that I'm not a teacher, but I think standardizing some things takes the burden off of the teachers on how to teach this, because it's just, they know what they have to teach at this point. But to everybody else's point, it also guarantees that across the board, everybody's getting the same base level of education on the subject.
Yeah, absolutely. And one other thing that I just wanted to mention, and we're going to transition to hearing a little bit about the local level, is that while, we're having these discussions at the state level, you can also advocate in your local community and with your local school board about what's happening in your school system. We have 8 counties that have a required course for graduation, but there are many, many more, obviously, that do not. So you need to ask some questions locally and find out what's happening in your school system. In Prince George's County, I know Susan Bestranzen is on with us today, and she's a teacher in Prince George's County, and she and her students were very influential in having that discussion with their school board about increasing access to personal finance information in Prince George's County. So while we're having these discussions at the state level, and we continue to work towards a common goal, you can still also do things at your local level to get involved and try to advocate for the students in your community. So with
Great.
that, I was going to say, with that, Alan, would you like to transition us to Montgomery County?
Yeah, sure thing. Let me make sure my microphone's on. Yeah. I'm about to introduce Sophia Wu. By the way, my name is Alan Cox, and I am the Assistant Director for Financial Education at the Maryland Council on Economic Education. I know a lot of folks on this call, so forgive me for not introducing myself earlier. Sophia Wu is with a group called Innovate X, and she's also a student at Richard Montgomery High School in Montgomery County. And Innovate X was very active last year in advocating to the Montgomery County Public School Board of Education for more financial education in Montgomery County schools. And the reason why they were so active and so adamant about going to the school board and going through the right channels. I mean, they did it right. They went to the various groups and they advocated for more financial education. They actually surveyed students in the school system saying, would you like to have more financial education? And those survey results were very dynamic and indicating that the students definitely want more financial education. And the fact that they really weren't getting it. And they were concerned about that. So this is a student, Sophia Wu, produced a video for us. And I think Rory and Julie, if we're ready to show that, you'll get an idea of what the students are facing in Montgomery County.
Okay. I'll just add that she's very soft-spoken, so you may want to turn your volume up, but I'm going to play the video now.
Hi everyone, my name is Sophia and I'm one of the CEOs of InnovateX, and I'm a senior at Richard Montgomery High School in Rockville, Maryland. I'm really excited to be here today and we're really thankful to the Maryland Council of Economic Education for providing us with this opportunity to talk about our experience with working with financial literacy education in Montgomery County. I'd also like to send a very special thank you to Ms. Weaver, who's really helped us with this process and developing this video and presenting it to you all today. So for a little background, InnovateX is a student-run nonprofit that was started in 2020 by our founder, Katie, who was at UPenn. At the beginning, our goal was to create entrepreneurial and financial resources for students of all socioeconomic backgrounds, and we worked with different entrepreneurs, college students, and professionals to provide college and job resources for high schoolers. So as we learn more about the state of financial literacy education in Montgomery County and Maryland as a whole, our mission evolved into increasing financial literacy education and making it accessible to all students. So before our work in the county, we took the matter into our own hands and began a personal finance after-school program for elementary and middle schoolers, where they could learn about the basics of personal finance to give them a good foundation for their future. So these curriculums were created by InnovateX members, and through our research to create good teaching materials, we learned about the lack of financial literacy education in MCPS. So from doing additional research, we learned that only 3 high schools in our county offer financial literacy courses, which really showed us that change needed to be made, since even these 3 courses weren't standardized by the county. So the only all-county education offered by MCPS is Finance Park, where 7th graders, usually in their social studies classes, go to a high school and learn about financial literacy through simulations and just things like that. And we found that continued education throughout high school was really lacking, and that's a really big issue, because high school is the time when students take control of their personal finances and start finding jobs, start filling out forms, start applying for loans for college, and they really need the support and the knowledge to do this successfully. And we've seen in our friends, and we've experienced ourselves, that this process is extremely confusing, and it's so easy to get lost when there's no one to guide you. So many students in our county are on their own in this process, and it's really important that at this time, or better yet, before this time, students are taught how to manage their finances and be equipped with the information they need to be successful in the future. So this was one of the main points we emphasized to our Board of Education, because the lack of adequate financial literacy education affects all students, especially those from low-income backgrounds, because they don't have the financial support to be successful. So throughout these 2 years, we've spoken to students and teachers from numerous schools to learn more about the lack of access and to spread awareness to members of MCPS, which was really our starting point. So in the beginning, we reached out to Board of Education members to schedule meetings with them and to learn more about the status of financial literacy in the county. They also connected us to the county social studies department, and from there we were able to talk to the county social studies department coordinator and the people who design Finance Park for middle schoolers. So we had a ton of meetings with them, talking about how we could get involved in this process and how we can test out, improve that financial literacy education needed to be improved. So as you probably all know, one of our neighboring counties, Prince George's County, had recently implemented a similar financial literacy requirement, and we were thinking that we can't fall behind in this aspect, so this is one of the things that we really emphasized. So through working with the social studies coordinators on the county level, we were able to create a student working group, which was called the Financial Literacy Working Group. There we got experts on financial literacy from different companies that had created financial literacy curriculums, and then also experts in education in general. For example, the Maryland Council of Economic Education. And we also had teachers who had taught financial literacy previously, and then students who were very passionate about the process and our goals. So you can see that we really tried to make our working group diverse with the different roles they have in MCPS, as well as the different schools that they come from. And this really helped us solidify our legitimacy to MCPS and the Board of Education. And amazingly enough, all the people we recruited were from our cold emailing efforts and the meetings we held with them, introducing our working group and talking about how they could get involved. So from there, our main goal with the working group was to develop a recommendation for MCPS, showing them our recommendations for the next steps to take towards improving financial literacy education. And although we did wish to get a graduation required implemented, our main goal was to show the Board of Education that a graduation requirement was wanted and needed by the students of MCPS. So to develop this letter, we created a survey for all high school students that asked about their thoughts on the current financial literacy education. So we asked them if they wanted a course at every school, since we wanted to create a countywide curriculum for everyone to use. And we also asked about their general financial literacy knowledge, like how comfortable they were with creating bank accounts, applying for student loans, filling out like a W-9 form, which is all like basic things that they will need for their future. One thing to note is that MCPS is supposed to have their financial literacy requirement fulfilled in students' governments and NSL classes. But we found from the survey that most students had never covered the 2-week module that they were supposed to cover. And this was something huge because it basically proved that the current structure of financial literacy and MCPS wasn't meeting the state requirements or providing any type of high school education. So in the form we had around like over 2,000 responses, which was pretty incredible since it was an optional form sent to teachers and counselors for their students to take. And through that, we were able to break down the data and present it in the recommendation letter to the Board of Education. So this was the formal way we were going about it through the school system and working with people in the central office. But on the other hand, we were doing a lot of student mobilization events to put pressure on the Board of Education to take action on the issue. So one of the ways we did this was through our letter writing parties, where InnovateX chapters held Zoom meetings where students could write letters to the Board of Education based on a template created by InnovateX, and they could receive SSL hours in return. This was really effective and influential because the Board of Education members received like hundreds of emails during these letter writing parties, and they could see how all types of students from like different high schools, grade levels, and backgrounds in Montgomery County, and how they all wanted financial literacy to be improved and how it impacted them all individually. So this really created pressure on the Board of Education to make a change. So another thing that we did was our personal finance town halls that had like the student member of the board, some Board of Education members, and some county council members, where they all came on and talked about their opinions on financial literacy and how we can implement more classes in more schools. We also had InnovateX members provide an overview of like the entire process, down to like the fundamental question of what is financial literacy and why is it important to us as students. So this was really important because many students in our county and just throughout the nation don't really think about financial literacy on a day-to-day basis. So it was really our goal to be informative, but like also persuasive, in that we wanted to show how students could join InnovateX and get involved in the process for fighting for financial literacy education. We had around like 60 attendees for our personal finance town halls, which was really successful considering everything was virtual and everyone who attended actually took the initiative to learn more about what was being done in our county to improve financial literacy education. So by combining our efforts with the working group and with these student mobilization events, we were able to work with the Board of Education, specifically Hana Aluni, the student member of the board, to develop a resolution to investigate whether or not it'd be possible to have a one-semester graduation requirement for financial literacy. So we had multiple testimonies at the Board of Education meetings, both in person and virtually. These were from InnovateX, like executive board members, but also from just high school students that were passionate about the subject. So we had a number of students who had never worked with InnovateX, but they did testify because they'd seen our calls and announcements on social media for people to testify because they saw how invested we were in it. So from there, the resolution for the investigation was passed. So we made sure to keep in contact with our social studies coordinators, the student member of the board, and Board of Education members throughout the few months that the issue was being investigated. Unfortunately, after those months, the graduation requirement was not passed at the time, but it hasn't deterred us, and we are still just as determined to see it get passed in the future. However, the recommendation letter from our working group did come out, and we still have all the testimonies that the Board of Education has heard before. So it's really exciting to see the accomplishments we've made so far. Even with this outcome, we were able to spread awareness to so many students, teachers, and parents, and we gained a lot of support within MCPS and within Maryland for our efforts in improving financial literacy education. So our main goal for the future is to still get that one semester graduation requirement passed, but we hope that we'll be able to inspire other counties to take the initiative to improve financial literacy in their counties and hopefully spread awareness of its importance. We'd also like to expand to the state level and see a graduation requirement be implemented for all high schools, for all Maryland high schools, to ensure that all students are properly prepared for their financial futures. So thank you for taking the time to listen about the work we've done so far regarding financial literacy education, and please feel free to reach out through Ms. Weaver if you have any questions or comments for us. Thank you and have a nice day.
I'll tell you, that is so impressive. I don't know what everybody else was like in high school. I was not advocating for more classes. So, I mean, the amount of effort that these kids put in to ask for this education is partially alarming. It shouldn't be the kids' jobs to ask for something that they are just so quite obviously lacking. But I mean, what an impressive effort. So I think at this point, Julie, did you want to make any more comments about that video? It was just, that's really impressive.
I agree. I mean, we have been so impressed and actually educated, about what's really happening at their local level by the work that they've done. And I mean, they almost write a playbook for what you can do in your local system to try to engage with your school board to make a change there. So yeah, it's a terrific group. I put in the chat the link to their website. If you'd like to learn more about the work that they're doing or support them in any way. Yeah, I can't say anything more about Sophia and those kids. They're really amazing.
We'll have to get them down to Annapolis.
Yes, maybe they could get one of those awards and everybody will stand up after everybody writes their legislators and tells them how important it is. But that would be a great thing if they did do that. But again, I'm going back to one of the things she said. We started a letter writing campaign to the school board. People need to, those in charge need to hear from everyone, not just this group that's on this panel right now. So it's up to all of us to really shake and make some noise. And, that's all I can say. Write your letters, legislators, and get all your friends to do the same.
Yeah, she made the comment, fighting for financial literacy education. And, that kind of struck me as a parent. Now, my kids are very young, but as a parent, even though she's not my kid, that made me feel like I wasn't doing our kids should not be fighting for more education. Just the way she phrased that it was pretty powerful. But with that, we've got a little bit of time left. Wanted to open the floor for some questions. If you have questions for either myself or Julie or Senator Klausmeyer, Delegate Stein, or anybody on the call, if you'll open the floor, we've got a little bit of time here.
Can I just say one thing? I've been talking an awful lot, but
Of course.
these students just didn't end up in this an innovative thing. They must have had a powerful teacher. That's who we need to get, whoever the teacher was that inspired them to do that, if it was one teacher or two teachers. And, you know, I'm not privy to all the teachers and what they're teaching in every school. So that might be a key right there. If somebody knows a teacher in a certain school that is really, really pushing the innovation, pushing financial education, that could be a start in these schools. But again, it's just a shame that you have to keep digging through whatever's going on in the school systems that don't have it to try to get them. That's why it's so important to get a statewide curriculum. So.
Thank you. And the floor is open, folks. Apparently, we have answered every question.
If I could make a comment, this session has truly been an example of preaching to the choir. All 20 plus people on here are absolutely supportive of financial literacy. I could go back through all the organizations I've been involved in and what I've done. I have testified a number of years in Annapolis on these laws. Every time when it comes to a vote, 100% of the Democrats on the committee vote against it, and 100% of the Republicans on the committee vote for it. So it never gets out of committee. The last thing I would also mention is on one of these calls that we've had, a Zoom, we had Peter Francho. Peter Francho stated on one of these calls publicly that it's the Democrats that refuse to allow Republicans a win as the Republicans try to push for a requirement of graduation in financial literacy. Peter mentioned that. Peter has been a strong supporter of financial literacy. It is a political issue because everybody agrees that we need to have financial literacy as a requirement, but it never gets through the legislature.
Well, Rick, I'm going to just say it's not Democrats and Republicans. It's part of the leadership. And this is a premature, I think, conversation because it might be all adjusted next year when we have different leaderships. But that's first thing. But the reason that we have not been able to get it through is it's very easy for when you have 3 Republicans to vote against it because that doesn't matter in that committee. But what happens in that particular committee is that I've stated that there might be 12 different legislators that put in different kind of things that they want in the curriculum. And so how does the chair pick one and not pick another? And it's very, very, very difficult. And that's what we're up against. It's not a Democrat Republican thing because the Democrat here, the Democrat up in the other corner, Dana Stein, said, how many sponsors were on that bill, Dana?
It was about 85.
80. So it's not Democrat, Republican. And I know Francho, Comptroller Francho has been a big advocate. Him and I have had many, many conversations, but it's just an uphill battle. And again, next year, it might be a slide down the hill and we might get it. So but again, you have to respect the other senators who have put bills in for different curriculum as well. So.
Thanks, Senator. Leonard Arvey put a question in the chat of what are the suggested next steps? How can we continuously engage our legislators and push forward with meaningful legislation, at least in the next legislative session? Well, to the final part of the question first, as Senator Klausmeier said a few times on this call, the state of play might be a little different in the next legislative session. So I think that might change the tactics a little bit. But I think, step one, and I don't know, who would be the coordinator of this. I don't know if this is in the Council on Economic Education's wheelhouse, but if everybody on this call is interested in this issue, you should all, or we should all, continue to coordinate, because it's one thing for each individual group to have some sort of campaign, but the messaging comes off spattered, and it might be a little different from organization to organization, and the timing might be a little bit different. But it's September now. Session starts in January, and between now and then, you can kind of come up with a coordinated campaign of make sure everybody knows who their legislators are, their delegates and their senators. Even reach out to the federal delegation, getting letters from them saying that they would support something like this, is helpful if they're willing to do it. But, you create a messaging campaign, you find, as we already know, we've got champions on these bills. But if they're going to put these bills in again in the upcoming year, we figure out what the bills are going to look like, create a messaging campaign around that, and then coordinate with everybody all at once to kind of push the message forward in a similar time frame. So every member of the Senate, every member of the House of Delegates is receiving similar messaging at a similar time period. Everybody's on the same page. That would be my advice. Start coordinating all these different groups on here that are interested. Start coordinating with one another. Start coordinating with Senator Klausmeier and Delegate Stein if they are looking to continue to push these types of bills in the future, and start working part of to Senator Klausmeier's point. Another major issue, not just on this bill, but almost on any big subject matter issue in the General Assembly, is you're going to get 15 people putting in a bill on the exact same topic, and they all look a little different. So you find the people in the General Assembly that have put forward similar bills like this year over year, and you keep them in the messaging loop as well. So everybody's on the same page. That would be my advice moving forward. Senator Klausmeier, Delegate Stein, I know it's all a little bit premature because we don't know what state government's going to look like from the top down, but a coordinated large-scale campaign, I've always thought, is more effective than groups kind of doing their own thing, because if the messaging is even slightly off from group to group, it could cause confusion amongst the members.
Yeah, maybe you should get this whole group together and make a snappy name for it, and everybody is on it. And it's just like the environmental groups. They have snappy names, and they come in and they're all together. Everybody's rowing in the same direction, and I think that's very, very important. Snappy name isn't, but everybody rowing together. But have something that people are going to say, hey, listen to that group, and it could be MCEE right behind it, and just push it. And I can't stress enough, know your legislators, but make a relationship with your legislators. Call them up and say, I'd love to have a cup of coffee and want to meet me at the local diner. And Roy knows where that is.
Yeah, gotta love my morning coffees with Senator Klausmeier at the Double T.
Yeah.
Just to jump in, I think that's great, Senator Klausmeier, great idea, and we're happy to reach out and see if we can pull people together. I had one more thing I wanted to ask about, though, Rory, which is when the bills are having hearings, there's always groups that file in opposition to the bills, which, is kind of surprising. Can you tell us, or Senator Klausmeier or Delegate Stein, about who those groups are and sort of maybe what their issues are?
You know, in my recollection, there was no one ever against it. Maybe I hear rumblings of the teachers union might not want it, but I don't ever remember them coming in, and nobody's against it. But they're, like I said, the problem is what the fact of the matter is, who's going to be against a curriculum of talking about, global climates, people aren't against any of those things. It's just the way it is, but it's been that way for quite some times, and it might be shuffled up next year. So,
Yeah, I think the only groups I've seen pretty consistently against it, and I'll preface with saying they're not against the issue. They're generally against curriculum mandates.
Right.
Is the Maryland Associations of the Board of Education and the Public School Superintendents Association of Maryland.
yeah, so,
And what we've asked them, as well as the unions, the teachers unions, if they are against it, although they have not come out against it, is if there are members of these associations who individually support the issue, they can still come out and say that they're in support of the issue. If the associations are going to take the general stance that they're against a curriculum mandate purely based on the fact that it's a curriculum mandate, then fine, that's the position that they're going to take. But if the individuals, if they're part of that, because there are individuals that are part of the boards of education and the superintendents groups who have told me personally that they think it's a great thing to do. They might not want to come out against their own associations, but that's the major hurdle, is getting them to come out either in favor or neutral on it. And to their credit, as Senator Klausmeyer said earlier, where the committee chairs run into the issues is, which mandated curriculum topic do I choose over which other one? And the school boards and the superintendents are kind of in the same boat of, this is one of many things that they are told should be in a curriculum.
right.
Now, we think it's the most important, and I think a lot of people, when it comes to just everyday life, would agree that your bank account, your credit account, it's the one thing you deal with it every day. It's extremely important. So it makes complete sense. But I do see why they come out against it, because it's, for them, it's just another thing that they're being told to do. But we would really love to see them come to the table and try to work through this, because it shouldn't be an issue that we need to battle for another 15 years to pass. I mean, this could have in theory been done in 2005 when the first bill came out, mandates curriculum, and 17 years later now, nobody's losing anything over it. It would have all been for the good. And it would have been, that would have been that. But anyway, that's not where we are.
Yeah, it might be good if anyone has a friend who is a teacher that is part of TAPCO. It's TAPCO's in Baltimore County, but if you get a group of teachers together and start saying, we don't mind this, but I have a feeling that they may be very quiet on that front because they don't want to disrupt their friends and everything else. But if you have one brave soul teacher come in and just say, it's time. So.
If I can jump in here, Julie Weaver has asked me to maybe clear up a misconception about curriculum for financial education. There are a number of very, very good curricula for financial education. In fact, the State Department of Education in Maryland actually has a curriculum that's been developed.
Right.
They've used it on an online course that students can take who do not have access to a course in their schools. But that's just one of many. The problem is not materials. There
Right.
are lots and lots and lots of very good materials. Junior Achievement has materials. EverFi has materials. There are lots of groups that have been working conscientiously on producing high quality teacher produced materials. That is not the problem. Another misconception, I think, is that you have to buy a textbook for this course. And that's an expense that often ends up in fiscal notes. You do not have to buy a textbook in personal finance education. The resources are out there. They're free. They're online. They're readily accessible. So just a couple of misconceptions that are out there that I wanted to highlight.
And I think that is exactly right. I bet every bank and every credit union has some sort of course that goes along with what they're doing. Roy, what do you think?
No, that's correct. And the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau has something. There are so many nonprofits, not-for-profits, governmental entities, quasi-governmental entities, non-governmental entities that have very substantially similar programs that are built exactly for this. And they were built specifically so there was no cost to schools. Because this has been an issue in Maryland for 17 years or so, but it's been a nationwide issue much longer. For probably the past 10 years, there have been free programs from across the board that are all substantially similar information wise that are available.
And junior achievement is really, really wonderful, but not all kids get to go. And what happens if junior achievement closes down one day? Not that I'm saying that they would, but that's why, that's like a private school versus a public school almost when you think about it. But we can't count on all those other things when we don't have it ourselves to make sure that the kids are getting it. So.
All right. Any
All right.
any final comments, questions, items of consideration?
This is Lee from the Credit Union Foundation. Just to kind of reiterate some of the topics that we've dealt with, obviously, to everyone's point, yes, there are the great programs available. I think as a group, as we look to following up on the conversation, pulling us together to come up with that messaging that you've talked about, Lori, and making the case that the programs, the coursework, it's out there and it's available. And we talk about financial literacy, but at this point, I feel like it's making that case that it is a financial wellness issue. It's really building a foundation for our students and for the adults who need it to understand their finances, because it impacts their lives, it impacts their financial health, and it all builds into the lives that they lead in the future. So I think, it goes beyond just the coursework. And I think if we tie it back into that impact and our messaging, that's my personal opinion on how we might make a better impact.
Terrific. So I think we're at the end of our time today. I think this has been a great discussion, and I just want to thank you, Lee, for your comments, and I want to thank Rory and Senator Klausmeyer and Delegate Stein, who had to leave, and of course our own Alan Cox, who is, I call him the legend. He's been around advocating for access to financial education for a really long time. We did record this session, so if you came in late, We will be posting it on our website, and I'll also share it with Lee and Rory to share with the Credit Union Association members who may want to see the video as well. And you can reach out to any of us at any time should you want to follow up on these discussions and take things to the next level. So thank you all for being with us today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Julie.
Thanks again.